Here's the news of the week. Tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in the capital of Nicaragua, demanding the resignation of President Daniel Ortega, after days of demonstrations in which nearly 30 people were killed by government security forces. Student-led protests began last week after Ortega introduced a plan that would increase pension contributions and reduce benefits. Ortega scrapped the changes, but the protests have continued. The U.S. State Department has pulled some of its embassy staff and families out of Nicaragua in response to the violence. Pope Francis has condemned what he's called needless bloodshed. Nicaragua's Catholic Bishops' Conference has agreed to act as a mediator and witness for national dialogue at the request of Ortega as he attempts to tamp down the tensions. The heartbreaking saga of Alfie Evans in Liverpool, England continues. He is the severely ill 2-year-old boy who British doctors and the courts have repeatedly ruled is in such a deteriorated state that further treatment will have no effect. His parents wish to continue his medical treatment and care, but under Britain's socialized medical regime, not only is his treatment not guaranteed, but it is the government and not his parents which will decide the treatment warranted. National Health Service doctors have refused to allow Alfie to be moved or to seek care elsewhere. His father, Thomas Evans, discussed his plight with Pope Francis last week. The Pope offered complete support, and this week, an appeals court upheld a lower court ruling that flying Alfie to the Vatican's Bambino Gesù Pediatric Hospital in Rome would be wrong and pointless. Alfie was removed from life support on Monday, but he continued to breathe on his own despite the diagnosis of doctors. Joining me now to discuss this heartbreaking story and more is the Director of Education at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, neuroscientist Father Tad Pacholczyk. Father Tad, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
I want to start with why the National Health Service is so insistent on demanding that this child remain in this Liverpool hospital and wasn't allowed to seek treatment elsewhere.
Well, this is a great question. That's probably the million-dollar question, Raymond. The argument seems to be basically that in the best interests of the child, he should be kept here, he should be kept under our watchful eye, and because pretty much any intervention that could be offered in the minds of this hospital would be futile. Therefore, we should keep him here until he dies. That seems to be the attitude or approach that is being taken. It's not in his best interests. They're trying to argue.
That's the terminology they use.
Yes, to move him elsewhere, take him to Italy, let him go home even.
But are we seeing in the British socialized medical regime, parents really don't have a decision in this process? It is the state that decides what's in the best interest of that child.
That's why this has struck such a chord, an international chord. This is clearly rubbing against the grain of very basic parental rights. Your ability to make healthcare decisions for your own child is under direct threat here, and everybody can see that. I mean, what these parents are requesting is in no sense unreasonable, and especially when you add another consideration to the mix in this case, which is they don't even have a diagnosis for Alfie. There's a neurodegenerative disease of some unknown etiology. So if it's unknown, you don't know what the future course is with 100% certainty. And look, when they said we're going to pull the tube so he can't breathe anymore,
the ventilator,
he's going to stop breathing immediately. He's already been going, what, 36 hours?
So they pulled the ventilator out on Monday, and the child continued to breathe on his own, and yet the hospital was determined not only to deny him oxygen, which they gave him for a little while, then they took it away. They've also denied him fluids, nutrition. How is that justifiable, and how is that in the best interest of this boy, this life?
And you know, they talk about, for example, sustaining his dignity, giving him a dignified death, that kind of language. And you ask yourself, well, if that's really the case, why won't they feed him? Why won't they make him comfortable with things that are very easily available to administer to him?
And I mean, I have to say, what a week for the Pope. The Pope met with the father, Alfie Evans' father, at the Vatican, and then tweeted out this week Moved by the prayers and immense solidarity shown little Alfie Evans, I renew my appeal that the suffering of his parents may be heard and that their desire to seek new forms of treatment may be granted. And the Pope didn't stop there. He backed it up by sending the CEO of the Bambino Gesù Clinic in Rome to Liverpool. She posted at the hospital, and there was a military plane waiting to take him back to Rome for treatment. The Italian legislature also granted him citizenship status. So Alfie was a citizen of Rome, of Italy rather. Why would the National Health Service be so belligerent and deny all of these efforts to help this child? What difference does it make to them?
Yeah, even if you argue it from the point of view of finances, you would still not have an argument on their behalf, because if they were to release Alfie, they would not have to take care of him anymore, pay, provide any more coverage. So there is a complete lack of kind of correspondence here with reasonableness on their part. So we're in a situation where this appears to be some kind of exercise of power.
Yeah.
This is our domain, our dominion. We are in a socialized medicine setting, and this is how we're going to play this out all the way to its bitter end.
Is this the cost of socialized medicine?
I think
we decide, we'll tell you what to do.
I think there's a definite tendency in this direction. This is a removal of what should be parental prerogatives and a usurpation of that by the state, or at least by the medical system, and supported by the judicial system.
Right.
Notice how strongly it's supported. It's unbelievable. Every time they go higher and higher on the food chain, even to the European Union, it's dashed, immediately dashed.
No, it's amazing. This boy has been in the hospital since December of 2016. He had a chest infection, and then he had ongoing complications, but he fought back, and then he had another infection, and then he fought back, and here we are. But if actuarial tables are what is being used, and they say, look, the cost of this boy's care exceeds the quality of life, so the best thing to do is rescind that care. Okay, they've made that decision. We get it. But the pride, the hubris to then say, but you can't leave our care. You're not going to leave this facility, because it would set a precedent that other citizens who were dissatisfied with our rulings could run off to other countries and find care, and we're not letting that happen.
Yeah, this is remarkable. I think that the fact that he's also an Italian citizen now makes the case even stronger, even clearer, even more stark for outside observers. And I think this is going to have to result in some pushback in British society. I mean, there are so many people protesting, both within and without of Great Britain. This is an opportunity, I think, to...
You pointed out the cops who are guarding the hospital. Your reaction to that?
It reminds me a little bit of the Terry Schiavo case. When there's something wrong going on and you have to post cops to keep good people out, it's very, very disturbing development. I mean, Terry Schiavo had 2 policemen posted outside her door to prevent anybody from attempting to feed her or, make her comfortable as she was dying, because her tube was withdrawn by court order also.
Right.
So when the courts get involved, we get a kind of medicine here that's often a disaster. And I think Alfie is going to, be the kind of another one of these paradigm cases.
A German pediatric cardiologist examined Alfie and said he could see that the child might benefit from more treatment. Why was that diagnosis completely waved aside and ignored by the Brits?
That's another good question. This was similar to the prior child, the Charlie Gard case, as you remember. There were experts who reviewed him and said the same thing. And basically they said, well, our expertise is going to trump any outside, rather than a second opinion. In the United States, we emphasize how important it is to get that second opinion. Here they're coming in abundance, and nobody wants to pay them any attention, and it's really a shame.
Would adults suffer in the same way? So if you had an adult who was going through this and perhaps could speak or make their intentions known, is it because we're dealing with a child? So the state steps in and says, no, parents, we will decide what's in the best interest of this child. Or would they have similar rights over adults as well?
This is very difficult to say. I think in the arena of parents and children, we see the state wanting to get involved. We see the state, for example, wanting to do things like, if your child makes up their mind that they want to receive contraception or have an abortion, we don't have to tell you as the parents. So there's this kind of intentional wedge that seems to be being driven between parents and children. Now, whether it would also hold in the case of adults, I suspect that would be the next step. It's harder to pull that off sometimes when you have somebody who is vocal and can speak in their own defense.
Now, the doctors here claim in the Alfie Evans case, they are acting according to protocol. And the protocol would be you suspend treatment if what you're offering will cause the child, quote, unacceptable pain and suffering and is not in his interests.
Yeah, but this pain and suffering, his dad over and over, and his mom, have emphasized that Alfie is not suffering. There's no indication of suffering or pain. I suspect, though, that if they continue to deny him food and water, there will be pain, there will be discomfort that he will eventually feel. This is a very primal appetite to be hungry.
A hungry child,
Absolutely. So I think, that piece is clearly up for debate. And, best interests, well, what are his best interests? If it's the case that this degenerative disease is going to progress and result in his death, then it's clear you would want him to be comfortable. So what does that mean? That means just providing the immediate needs so that he doesn't have to struggle and in those final times.
Now, the church, in its moral view, does not require extraordinary means. A ventilator is not required.
Well, ventilators depend on the circumstances because there will be some situations where you'll say, this ventilator could be used and it would be a bridge to somebody's healing.
Which may have happened here. He was on the ventilator for months and then they took it out and he's breathing.
He may have strengthened a little bit and now he may be in a new place. This may be a new opportunity, but those are kind of subtleties that have to be worked out between the family and the healthcare team. And we've had a kind of breakdown in this case, clearly, where it is entirely antagonistic, and this is a tragedy. We need to always have, as a final decision maker, the parents who clearly do have the child's best interests in mind, unless, there is some kind of clear, outright evidence of abuse of the child by the parents. And of course, there's nothing even remotely resembling that in this case, as there was not in the Charlie Gard case.
It's a frightening situation. They need to get some human rights law on the books that protects parents and their guardianship of their children, particularly when it comes to life and death health decisions. I don't know why that doesn't exist, but to my eye, this looks like state-sanctioned murder because they want to protect the integrity and the power of the National Health Service.
This is a kind of tyranny of medicine over their own patients. And I think I just read a statement by a group of doctors strongly opposing this and saying this is not the role of physicians to be exercising decision-making instead of the family.
Well, and in a week when we were celebrating the royal birth, what a statement it might have made had the Queen or William or Kate come out on behalf of Alfie Evans. It would have been an important marker, I think, about the respect for all human life,
I agree.
not just those in line.
A missed opportunity, as it were.
I agree. Let's talk for a moment before we run out of time. Weeks ago, we saw a story in the New York Times where Barbra Streisand had cloned her dog for, I think, $50,000. Now, it seems we're getting closer to cloning human beings.
We certainly
on demand.
And I mean, part of the reason we can say that with such certainty is because of what the Chinese did at the beginning of 2018. You may remember they successfully cloned monkeys for the first time, and they made 2 cloned monkeys. So those monkeys are growing fine. They don't seem to have any untoward issues. So we've figured out the technology for doing it with primates. You and I are primates. It's just a matter of time, enough dollars, and a certain desire to do it. And I think we're going to see it. My guess is we're looking at 5, maybe 7 years, and we'll see a human clone that will be born.
So Barbra Streisand, too.
Barbra Streisand, too, perhaps.
Let's hope she doesn't clone herself and she stops at the pooch. The New York State has an assisted suicide bill that they are trying again to revive. The prospects for that, in your opinion?
Prospects, I think, hard to call. I think there is a chance something like this could get through. But I think people are asking the good question, shouldn't we be supporting individuals? Because it's partly set up to say, disabled people, people who face disabilities, who face struggles at the end, this is a way for them to get out. And the disability community is rising up. There's a group, I think it's called Not Yet Dead.
Not Yet Dead.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they're protesting this and saying, look, this isn't the way to do it. I saw something interesting, and you perhaps saw it too on some of the news reports recently. There was a guy who was going to jump off of a overpass on the highway. And this was in Detroit. What they ended up doing was they put a whole bunch of semis underneath. Did you see that?
I did.
And I thought, look at the measures they took to save and protect his life.
Yeah.
Now, we seem to be trending in the exact opposite way when it comes to physicians and suicide. The physicians are not putting those safety nets. They're rather saying, hey, you want to end your life, just ask me, I'll prescribe something lethal so you can carry out the dastardly deed. Tragic kind of collapse of the medical profession at its core.
No, we're seeing it internationally. Father Tad Pacholczyk, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
We'll check in again soon. For more on Father Tad's work and to read his commentary, visit National Catholic Bioethics Center's website at ncbcenter.org.